afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Delta Dialogues, your monthly call for the integrated photonics community. My name is Johan Smeets, and I'll be your host today. Last time, in March, we presented to you the feasibility study of a European PIC foundry together with Roland Berger. This episode will be focused on looking back at the OFC in San Diego that took place a couple of weeks ago. The OFC is one of the most influential events when it comes to optical communication and networks. Over 12,000 participants gathered in San Diego, and there were around 500 exhibitors. For PICs, the data and telecom market is a mature one, mostly dominated by silicon photonics. This year, however, the Dutch delegation was bigger than ever, and we had 9 partners from the ecosystem attending. In today's program, we have various people presenting to you the key takeaways of the OFC San Diego. We will start with our own colleague Carol de Vries, CTO at PhotonDelta, who will give his general observations on the trends in technology. After that, we'll have no one less than Jose Pozo, CTO of Optica, who will shine some lights on the industry trends and recap the executive summit that he hosted at the OFC. Then we'll go to Joost Verberk. Joost is the Director of Product Management at EFFECT Photonics, and he will tell us what were the most important developments for EFFECT Photonics at the event. Last but not least, we'll have the Executive Director of Fraunhofer HHI, Martin Schell, presenting a keynote about silicon photonics versus heterogeneous systems. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat so I can address them to the speakers. And let's start. Hello, Carol.
Nice to be here.
Welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Carol, so you were at the OFC a couple of weeks ago. It was in March. Tell us about it. How was it for you?
Well, it was great. It was effectively a real live event, and I think you can say a lot of the people were really like, finally a live event where you can be out there in force and talk to everybody face to face.
Yeah.
And it's a huge event. You already said it. It's very big. So I'll give some general impressions, and my colleagues on the call will be able to go more in depth later on some of the specific elements.
All right.
But
sounds good.
Let's start with big show. Many people, it's both a show and an exhibition and a conference.
Yeah.
If you try to cover the more important things of both, you have really your work cut out for you, because even the conference is already more than 10 parallel sessions going on at the same time, and it covers everything from fiber optics to data center architecture to system architecture to even the smallest details of developing a new detector or another component. So it's really very, very broad, very wide, and it also is very global. So not only were there many people from the US and Europe, but there's also quite sizable delegation from China, for instance.
All right, good.
And some of them were presenting through video call, but also quite a few were there. So it's really a very big, important event.
Yes.
And the fact that you have this broad coverage and that on the show floor things were extremely busy, you can really see that, this is a very, you can say in one sense it's a mature industry because it is the most mature activity for integrated photonics.
Yeah,
on the other hand, it is developing at breakneck speed. So mature in the sense of boring, it is certainly not.
No.
Right. So there's a lot going on in the show, on the show, the side of the show, everything. That's very, 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 very nice. So, let's go through some of the tech elements.
What were the most important trends? I think you've mentioned to me earlier today that the data consumption exponential growth is still valid.
Yeah, it is. And effectively, the exponential growth in data consumption, which we are all contributing to, of course, is driving, of course, the breakneck speed of the development of data centers, telecommunication, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So that means that the speed race is still very much on. And so 400G is there, 800G is announced, and it just goes on 1.6, 3.2. I do not see that slowing down.
That's doubling every time.
It's just like it was, it is just continuing at breakneck speed because it comes at really at every few years. So that is absolutely a thing. And what is very specific among this whole thing, and not only are growing more data centers and you get more communication, 5G, there's of course talk about 6G, but it also is artificial intelligence that is driving an enormous amount of activity right here, because within this whole data center world, the artificial intelligence element is the fastest growing part of all. And the data sets that are being used are growing at incredible rates.
Yeah.
And for us, interesting is to notice that AI is very data transport heavy.
Yeah.
And that means that it drives a lot of activity in also in integrated photonics, and like a lot of other developments. So that's one trend. Speed race, it's there.
Yeah.
But the second thing, and I think that is really growing to become just as important, is the power consumption part.
Okay.
The new buzzword is picojoule per bit.
Picojoule per bit.
Yes. Of course, if you keep in mind that our data consumption is growing at such a fast rate that in 2026 we will add as much capacity as the whole world had in 2018, you know that this is just an enormous growth. So that is driving two different things. One is the data centers itself. Mm-hmm. They are hundreds of megawatts consumptions per data center. And that is in itself an issue, because even though you reduce the picojoules per bit, if we keep continuing more data usage, it still will grow the power consumption, and that is a problem in many countries. In the Netherlands, I know it's about 3% of electricity consumption right now.
Right.
If it would grow exponentially, it would really have a problem in a few years. Yeah. Apart from the fact that many countries, including the Netherlands, already have a problem that the grid is not strong enough to keep everything connected.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. On the lower level in the data center, of course, all that power that is being consumed has to be cooled away. And that's creating problems in the racks, in the server blade, and in the chips itself. So in itself, that's already another challenge that has to be tackled. Otherwise, it will simply not be possible to build the tools as they should be. So
that's the heat generated.
The heat generated is basically a data center is a few photons in, a few photons out, and the rest is generating heat. And so that's an important element. So that's this picojoule per bit is becoming really center stage, and there, of course, integrated photonics plays an important role, because compared to electronics, it's much less power hungry if designed properly.
Yeah.
Now, those two big trends have a few derivative trends. One of it is that you see a lot more attention for coherent modulation schemes. The word coherent is very much everywhere. Mm-hmm. That's good for integrated photonics, because coherent systems are more complicated. And for that reason, it is very well suited for integration in integrated photonics.
Right.
So that's one. Another one that has to do with power consumption is the co-packaged optics. That was already a trend, because it reduces the power consumption in the wiring surrounding all the chips. Mm-hmm. But it was a huge problem in the industry, because all those fibers need to be connected. And if something is wrong with one of them, you basically have to throw away the whole system. So I think you see a lot of progress in that field as well. Mm-hmm. Probably others will come back on that too. Yeah. Then, interesting, that is other approaches. Mm-hmm. Let's say the current approach on data centers and switches and so is something that is being done. You see still a lot of pluggable transceivers everywhere. However, some new trends are also there. For instance, the way of switching. An interesting announcement was in that respect Google, mm-hmm. who said that they have basically replaced the top layer of their switching structure by a MEMS mirror-based optical switching system.
Interesting.
So you can probably see some more of those trends coming in the future, and I think that's a very interesting one, also from our photonic viewpoint, of course. Yeah. And last but not least, and you saw that quite often in discussions in the different conference settings, you have to think about the system. One of the more prominent ones is, for instance, people say, yeah, it's nice, we make a better and faster transceiver, mm-hmm. but it's more sloppy. And with these complex coherent schemes, then you have to basically demodulate and clean the signal in order to get a good data rate. So if you make a better lower power transceiver, but then you need a much bigger DSP, then you have moved some power there in order to get it back in another place.
Exactly.
So it is really about thinking in systems that's important.
Taking the entire system in mind when designing your...
Yeah, and all that affects.
Okay.
our PIC systems.
Exactly. And so indeed, you already mentioned it, so that will affect our PIC system. So when it comes to photonic integrated circuits, even though it's only a portion of the entire conference, what do you think was the most important key, like, takeaway that you got?
Yeah. Well, if you look at the show floor, then it's still silicon photonics all over the place.
Dominating, yeah.
However, you see that more and more elements are coming back from different material systems. Integrated photonic solutions on one part, I think it will come back later, but also other material systems and heterogeneous integration. So where it was silicon photonics and external lasers all over the place, you now see much more discussion about making heterogeneous systems. Mm-hmm. You see new material systems coming in, like lithium niobates that are becoming of interest, of also newer ones, BTOs, etc., polymers. All of that will try to find a place in this more and more speed race, complex, lower power type of system.
Yes.
And the rump session I found very interesting. I think Martin has more to say about that, but
yes,
that was a more or less humorous way of discussing this very important theme. And I think towards the end it was more or less like, it might very well be that silicon is in the future a nice carrier for all the other material systems.
Okay.
Of course, this was a somewhat exaggerated way of saying it, but it just gave away the picture of this new trend in the world that is becoming more prominent.
So it started a discussion, and it's also maybe a way of opening the door to new other platforms,
Absolutely.
other technologies.
Absolutely.
And that's maybe also a reason why we saw this big number of delegates from PhotonDelta ecosystem taking part in the exhibition.
Yeah. But for sure not the only ones. But yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we're not the only ones, of course. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Carol, for this recap. I think it was very clear.
It was my pleasure, and I think the others have certainly some nice material to add on to that.
Yes, I think so too.
Okay,
all right,
thanks.
Thank you. See you. All right, so our next speaker is Jose Pozo. Jose is the CTO of Optica. I think most of you, if not all of you, already know him. And Jose will give us a recap on the industry trends at the OFC and will tell us what was discussed at the executive summit that he hosted at the OFC. Jose, if you could please unmute yourself and put on your camera. We're gonna see if we can get you into this.
Thank you very much. It means the world to me to be here. As you may know, I joined Optica only last year in March, and this was really the first time that I was one of the organizers of OFC. And that's a dream. That's a dream for anybody in the photonic integrated circuit community. We are talking about the most influential conference worldwide when it comes to bring integrated photonics to the hyperscalers. It was a fantastic conference, and having the support of PhotonDelta and the Dutch ecosystem there meant the world to us. The platform that PhotonDelta has proposed to the industry, collaborating with foundries, collaborating with semiconductor manufacturers, bringing the integrated photonics designers and packaging centers all together for the sustainability of the indium phosphide and silicon nitride platforms is a dream for us and an example to follow. So I'm going to start. Jorn, first of all, I cannot really compliment enough what Carol just did, because Carol just actually did my job. He summarized every single thing that happened at OFC, and he did it with a fantastic set of charisma. I'm gonna give you a few takes, maybe a bit more in detail of what I would like to share with you. Let me first share with you my screen and then share with you my vision. I would like to start by, like every presentation, we're going to start with a beautiful disclaimer. I would like to start with a disclaimer. A few of the slides contain market data. I am whatsoever not responsible. I don't own a crystal ball. I wish I did, but I don't. So whatever market data is expressed here is the responsibility of the market analysts that are professionally acknowledged here. If you want to download all the market reports that Optica provides, optica.org/market reports, you can just go to this link and you can get all the market reports, including also all the presentations from all the different events, including the executive forum. I would like to, because many of you know very well what Optica industry is, but don't know the entire Optica. So allow me to just give you a grasp of 10 seconds. Optica is a network that covers 93% of this planet. We have 170 people staff. We have a working publishing group with papers such as Optics Prex or Optics and Photonics letters. We have also a group of individual members with Nobel Prize winners all the way to students worldwide, 24,000 of them. And we also have an industry association. Altogether, we have made 432,000 engagements last year. 432,000 people were engaged with Optica one way or another, representing this amazing $500 billion industry at Optica is. My job within Optica is to lead the corporate engagement department, that is the industry association. So the companies that join Optica to work together. They get trusted R&D access, they get market reports, and they get access to unique set of meetings online and in person. Just to let you know that still we focus on the small companies. 90% of our companies have less than 100 employees. But let's start. So this year, a lot of cool things happen at Optica, at OFC. And I would like to start by every year at the Executive Forum, we always try to get the latest market data and show it to our members. So one of our partners, Omdia, in the voice of Lisa Huff, brought the latest findings or market reports. And we were finding very interesting the fact that the transceiver revenue, which was around 2.9 billion in 2021, is expected to grow to 8.3 billion in 2027. And ICT data centers have really, as Carol has said before, have really started to upgrade to connections in 200G and 400G. Still, the most popular transceiver deployed today is the 400G based Tier 4. That's still the most popular transceiver, and we have seen 100G and 200G variants with long tail due to lingering concerns with power consumption of 400G. What we have seen as well, many of you are going to see this as a trend, is that Meta and Microsoft are still in favor of the CPO co-packaged optics to reduce power consumption. I'm going to address the topic of power consumption because, as Carol said before, it was by far the most important topic at the conference this year. I also would like to extend what he said about AI. This year, for the first time at the Executive Forum, we had a lightning round of startups that were just getting out of the stealth mode. And one of those startups was the company Nubis Communication. For those of you who are geeks in this industry, you know Peter Windsor very well. We grew up reading his papers. So Peter Windsor has a startup called Nubis Communications. And in that startup, what he's trying to do is to manage to put 3.2 terabit capacity on a chip. Easy, right? Well, the question here is, how do we deal with the biggest challenge, as it was said before, the challenge of power consumption? And what you see in this graph over here, you are seeing that there are three main paths to follow. One of these is what we call direct drive pluggable. Direct drive is nothing else than switching every component with the minimum voltage possible. Then we have the co-packaged optics, very fashionable in the last years. It does seem that it's decreasing a bit of interest, but still with these two hyperscalers behind it, we'll see how it goes. And then what was one of the biggest trends this year? The chiplets. We have heard the word chiplets already quite a bit on the last 24 months. It is the time in which chiplets have become the trend to follow when it comes to power savings. What we are seeing is that they require the very smart integration of electronics and photonics on the same chip. And that's a trend that we think is the most important for the photonic integrated circuit community. It is not about integrating silicon and indium phosphide. It is about integrating integrated photonics and electronics on the same chiplet for volume production and keeping the electronics as close as possible as to the photonics with the lower possible voltage. For me, that's the biggest trend this year at OFC. But for those of you who attended the Executive Forum, you also noticed that there is a major trend on WDM. Until now, when it comes to WDM chips, we have tried in many ways to decrease the amount of power that we give to every wavelength. At the end of the day, WDM is nothing more than creating a set of wavelengths and treating them individually. what we are seeing lately by different companies, I'm highlighting here Alphalium, but there are others. What we are seeing from them, from companies like Quintessent or Elytra, is the possibility of having one unique light source to cover about 20 to 100 nanometer wavelengths and treat each wavelength individually. These COM lasers are becoming a very interesting path to the growth, and they are normally manufactured with different 3-5 components. Quantum dots have considered by companies like Quintessent and Alphalium, quantum dots are considered the key material system for this. And why? Because we get the flattest possible gain over the larger range of wavelengths, integrating these COM lasers into silicon photonics with the minimum reflections, because remember, we are actually integrating a large amount of wavelengths on the chip. Vertical grating couplers in silicon will not work. Integrating all these wavelengths on the silicon photonic chip is a major trend for the packaging facilities. I am pretty sure that PhotonDelta partner Fix is looking at it very, very carefully. For me, this is also a really big lesson learned. Remember this: large gain, lots of wavelengths, one unique lasers that needs to be integrated onto silicon photonics. Another big trend, and this year for me was the year of Arista raising everyone's eyebrows. We have Andy Ventorsheim at the Executive Forum this year, and he was interested in reducing the optics power. And he told everyone, look, there is one thing that is consuming a lot of power in every single pluggable transceiver, and that's the DSP, the digital signal processor. And he wondered, can we remove the DSP? And you know, it is not just removing a device from the system. I mean, removing the DSP is there for a reason, right? But can we actually remove the DSP? And assuming that we could, he has made a study and saying that he can reach 25 to 30% savings in DSP optics by just using what we call linear drive optics. Don't get mistaken by the concept. We can talk about linear drive for as long as you want. Just think the linear drive is to use the minimum voltage that you need to keep the modulator working on linear regime. That's what it is. We can talk about more in the future, but just keep this because this is a very important concept which is going to be repeating once after the other on the coming years. Switching from DSP to linear drive is the major trend that we're going to observe from the pluggable transceiver companies. And why? Until now, we are seeing three main technologies for the pluggable optics. The VCSELs for multi-mode operation, the silicon photonics for single mode. Thin lithium niobate is coming really strong. What Arista has done, and this is based on measure results, is to use silicon photonics, linear drive, and measure the power consumption compared to DSP. And that made everyone crazy. This is a 900G pluggable device. He showed 50% of energy savings. What made it even more interesting is that then he removed the silicon photonics modulator and he used a lithium niobate modulator from a cooperation that he has with other Optica corporate member, which I am allowed to say, with Hyperlight. And they showed this fantastic energy savings, even more going from 15 picojoule per bit on using DSP and silicon photonics to 6.3 picojoules per bit using the thin lithium niobate on insulator and on the silicon photonic device. And for me, this is huge. And remember, as Carol said before, thin lithium niobate on insulator is not the only material that is needed or that could be used for increasing the modulation speed and decreasing the power consumption. There are others. There is also the polymer from companies like Logic, Silorix. There is Orichip. There is also the plasmonics from companies like Polariton. There is, of course, the VTO material from our friends from Lumiphase. This is a major trend now to see how these materials, now that Arista have shown clearly that the benefit is huge on power savings, how these materials are going to enter the semiconductor manufacturing process. And I would like also to finish with another thing a bit different. Yes, OFC has been OFC has seen for many years being the conference for optical communications. But this year, for the first time, we saw more and more companies talking about AI. And that discussion went very fast, talking about augmented reality. And I'm going to tell you why I think this is a major trend. I'm here borrowing a slide from one of our corporate members, this Pelix, and they show that in this slide that there are three paradigm shifts needed to make an AR goggle. Those are using lenses, those are using weighted materials for the lens, and those are using the micro display. And for each one of these three, there are a clear roadmap for them. One of them is the use of waveguides, the use of light engines, the reduction of the power of the batteries, and of course the applications. But allow me to talk about the light engines here. When you think about the companies that are driving today the AR industry, you see, and this is funny for me, that they are the hyperscalers. The hyperscalers, Google, Meta, this is from a market report from Joel. We had the light version of this market report available for our members in the link that I gave in the beginning of the presentation. This is driven by the AI companies and by the hyperscalers. And you know why? Because, and based on the latest market data we have received, this is the growth that we see on wafer glass used for AR from now until 2027. By far the biggest growth, in any photonic industry today. The need for making a smart glass for AR VR sets. Yet still, we don't have a proper light engine. We don't have a proper light engine to make the AR VR properly. So I want to highlight, because I'm here and I always love to highlight our members, I want to highlight one of our corporate members, also member of PhotonDelta. Lyonix last year went to the conference CES and they said, look, we can actually make with silicon nitride photonic integrated circuits, we can make a light engine. All we want to do is to integrate an RGB, three light sources, RG and B, and integrate and couple them into a silicon nitride chip, as you can see here in the figure, and using a diffractive optical element portraying in the camera. So what I want to say with this is that, yes, for photonic integrated circuits for optical communications, OFC was fantastic. Do not only look at optical communications. There are many other application fields, and one of them, this one highlighted by Lyonix, makes us particularly excited. I would like us to conclude that every market data that you saw in this, you can download from optica.org/market reports. Just go there, and all the market data is there, and you're going to find very clear information, for example, about the size for displays, for communications, and also how this data it is scalable to the entire global economy. And with this, I would like to thank PhotonDelta, thank the Netherlands, thank Europe, and thank the world for the fantastic photonics technology. Jörg, back to you.
Thank you very much, Jose, for this wonderful presentation. I think we've seen a lot of interesting things coming by. You've been able to provide us with some very interesting additional insights, besides what Carol already told us before. So if I understood it correctly, we see chiplets, right, as the most important trend in terms of bringing optics and electronics on a single chip, bringing them closer to each other in order to save energy. We saw also that the DSPs might become obsolete with the developments of Arista, that they achieved a 50%. And we also saw that the AR augmented reality is also becoming a topic at the convention, with Lyonix as a good example. And in fact, they recently split off this activity of making VR modules to a new company called Brilliance. So it's very promising steps that are being taken there. All right, so the next speaker of today is Joost Verberk. Joost is actually not live with us, so we have a recording recorded presentation, and so a colleague of Joost will be in the call that can answer eventual questions. After Joost, we will go to Martin Schell, who will give us a keynote presentation, and then we can conclude this session.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to PhotonDelta for inviting me to participate in this edition of the Delta Dialogues. So today I will be talking a bit about our experiences as OFC 2023. But let me first start off by introducing myself. My name is Joost Verberk. I'm the Director of Product Management at EFFECT Photonics. And that means I take care of our product portfolio, which products we put in there, and which markets we want to enter. And for us, OFC 2023 was a big market entry point because we are expanding our portfolio, and that's what I'll talk about a little bit today. Before I dive into the details of what happened at the trade show, let me first introduce EFFECT Photonics a little bit in terms of the key technological pillars that we build on, because that will help you understand some of the messaging that we brought out at OFC 2023. So at EFFECT Photonics, our focus is divided over three key technology pillars. The first being the digital signal processor, oftentimes referred to as DSP. A DSP is an application-specific integrated circuit that can overcome fiber impairments and provide forward error correction. And what we mean basically with that is that it's an electrical chip that can help the optical chip achieve higher bit rates over longer distances, and for our customers it can help simplify network design. With our acquisition of the Viasat team last year, we have gained access to field-proven designs from everything to 100G all the way up to 800G. So that's sort of the first pillar, focusing on the electrical IC design. Second pillar is centered around our optical capabilities, and that is mainly the ultra-pure light sources. So in ultra-pure light sources, we focus on the indium phosphide material platform to produce high performance and efficient lasers enabling full photonic integration. The core is the laser, but in our platform we can co-integrate with other components as well, such as modulators or photodiodes or amplifiers. And this enables faster data transmission, miniaturization, and automated packaging. And because everything is contained within one optical chip, this provides high resilience and also lower power consumption. The third pillar is not so much a technology pillar in and of itself, it's the way we look at manufacturing. And in that space, we focus on leveraging the existing electronics ecosystem. And there specifically you can think of things like the existing design, wafer manufacturing, packaging and test infrastructure that has been put in place over the last decades and where billions have been invested. And this allows us to scale in both cost and performance, increase our speed to market, and is an enabler for photonics everywhere. Okay, so that's a little bit about EFFECT Photonics. Now we move back to the core topic of this talk, and that's the experiences at OFC. So our main message at OFC was enabling 100G coherent at the edge. And to do that, we had a booth presence. It was quite a large booth, about 37 square meters, with a meeting room also on site where we could have private discussions with our customers, and also a public booth where we could have public discussions and talk about our latest announcements. It was super busy. This year was nice to see that all the different nationalities were back again, including the Asians. So the effects of COVID, let's say we were back to pre-COVID visitor numbers on our booth. We hosted more than 60 meetings with different interested parties. And besides the meetings, we also had for casual passers-by some demos on our touchscreens where you could play with the photonic integrated circuits, but also design your own module. Most importantly, we had 3 major announcements at OFC, and I'll go through them in order. So the first one was the unveiling of the development of the pico-tunable laser assembly, which is meant to enable QSP28 100G ZR coherent pluggable modules. Okay, so there's a lot of jargon in there, so let me unpack. The first thing is 100G, so 100 gigabit per second transmissions. ZR, which means we focus on link lengths between 80 and 120 kilometers. And the last aspect is QSP28, which is a small form factor pluggable. That's what the SFP stands for, with 4 electrical lanes. That's what the Q for quad stands for. So 4 times 28 or 4 times 25 is 100 gig. Why is this special? Because 100 gig coherent has been around for a long time, but it's been mainly used in subsea connections, data center interconnect, and the boxes that do that are quite large. And what we've announced now at this show is that we will be bringing this out in a very small form factor, actually a form factor that is already deployed quite widely in the networks, but currently is only available in gray optics for shorter distances. So we will be providing colored optics that can traverse much longer distances, and thereby enabling our customers to take their existing switches and routers and upgrade them significantly in capacity at a very low cost point. So that's the module itself, but that's not what we announced. What we announced was the laser. And to make this laser work inside of such a small module, you need to have a very tiny laser. And currently there's no one in the market that has lasers that fit inside of this module. And this is what we announced. We will bring out a pico, again very small, tunable laser assembly that can fit in this box, and that will enable this application. So that was the first announcement. And shortly prior to the show, we also announced that we secured another 40 million in additional funding. So that's also a great boost for us to be able to accelerate our product introduction and make sure that all the announcements that we did, that we can fund them and see them through to product introduction. Final announcement we did was the collaboration with Credo. So Credo is a well-known DSP vendor. So far they have been focusing on the sort of direct detect DSPs or PAM4 DSPs, but together with us, with our expertise on coherent, together we will now launch the first coherent 100G DSP in Credo's portfolio, where again we focus on high performance, ultra low power DSP solution that can go in that same QSP28 box, and together with our pico-tunable laser can enable this 100 gig coherent at the edge. So if we wrap that all together and we then look at our total product offering, this was also something that was new at OFC. Up until this point, we were active mostly on the left side of this page, so on the DWDM transceiver, so the pluggables itself, direct detect and coherent. But at this show, we also announced that we will be enabling the market with our sub-assembly, so also with our subcomponent sales. And there you can think of the laser we just talked about, but also through partners like Credo doing the sales of a DSP with our IP inside. So we don't just bring pluggables, we also enable the market to develop this low-cost, low-power edge transceivers. And that's it. That's what I wanted to talk about today. As you can see from this last slide, we are trying to make our technology available to everyone who needs it. And then I think there's a lot of nice applications that can be unlocked by people using the technology that we have.
All right, thank you, Joost, very much for sending us this input. Very good review at what EFFECT Photonics was up to at the OFC in San Diego. So a lot of important steps are being made. I heard a $40 million funding round, a new collaboration, but as well a new product launch for one of the well, trending topics that Carol was discussing earlier, coherent, right? Okay, so we arrived at our last speaker for today. Our last speaker is Martin Schell. He is the Executive Director at Fraunhofer HHI. And Martin Schell was also at OFC giving a presentation. I think Carol already briefly touched upon the topic and the context, but I'm asking Martin to unmute himself, to turn on his camera. You can also share your screen if necessary, and you can take the floor and let us know what was your presentation there.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Martin.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, very good. So the absolute opposite of a keynote, right? So do you see my slides?
Yes, we can see your slides.
So perfect. So it was the absolute opposite of a keynote. So it's a rump session. And to explain that a bit, the OFC conference reception starts on Wednesday, 6 p.m. Rump session starts at 7 p.m. That means most of the participants already have 1 or 2 beer inside, and the people who talk there are called provocateurs. So it's the host explicitly stated it's more important to be opinionated rather than to be scientific exact and something like that. So that's the background which you have to understand to put the slides into the right context. After God created the world and the fiber to connect people living on the world, she found out that fiber is not enough. That you also need some materials for the ends of the fiber where you convert photons into electrons and electrons into photons. So she thought about the best material for these endpoints. It should have efficient light generation and amplification. It should have fast and efficient phase and amplitude modulation. It should ideally have the best optical properties where fibers have their lowest absorption. And the scale economics should be appropriate for the market. That was going through her mind, and then she created indium phosphide. As you all know, then started the big flood. That was a big flood of investor money. But all this money was going on indirect bandgap material, maybe through some miscommunication, through some heavenly misunderstanding. And what happened as a consequence is that indirect bandgap material, silicon, developed some remarkable functions and came to some really remarkable optical functionality. Now, what happened to poor indium phosphide? Nonetheless, also there was by no way comparable money being invested in indium phosphide. There was a remarkable progress achieved. For example, 200 gigabit lasers can be done even by small German research institutes and are now in production in the larger companies. Keep in mind that one tiny 3-inch wafer carries 30,000 EMLs. And if one builds up these 30,000 EMLs to modules, these modules can transmit 20 zettabytes per year, which is 4 to 5 times the yearly internet traffic. So one wafer of these lasers can transmit 4 to 5 times the internet. The detector speed reached 145 gigahertz with quasi-commercially available detectors, also from small Berlin institution. There were companies, there was a University of Eindhoven and NTT are working on indium phosphide membrane technology. They achieved very high 3dB bandwidth of 100 gigahertz and very small feature sizes. And the latter one is especially important because one of the advantages of silicon is a high index contrast, which allows them to make smaller structures. That means more structures on the same wafer area than indium phosphide, and this indium phosphide membrane technology is one way to overcome this disadvantage. 200 gigabaud Marzenders have been demonstrated in pure indium phosphide technology. And what I like most is that it looks like indium phosphide has also reached the first consumer products. And this is especially important when it goes about scaling into the future years. And so after all that, I looked into my crystal ball and tried to find out something about the future. And I saw a peaceful and synergetic coexistence of silicon and indium phosphide, integrate indium phosphide or whatever wherever needed, use silicon mechanical properties, use silicon or maybe even silicon carbide because due to better heat conductivity, silicon carbide could be a better carrier for optical materials like indium phosphide or BTO or thin film lithium niobate. And indium phosphide standalone where EMLs and DMLs are sufficient. And indium phosphide, of course, in test and measurement where you need a factor of 2 or 4 higher performance at larger cost budget than in production. But then I looked a second time in my crystal ball and found some alternative future. And the alternative future starts with the history. And the history of silicon photonics is that silicon photonics has a long history of adapting to changing environments. The first changing environment was that silicon photonics was invented when the CMOS node side roughly matched lambda over 2. So there was good matching between the structure sizes you need in silicon, in photonics, and in electronics. Now, 15 to 20 years later, the CMOS node is at 4 nanometer, 8 nanometer, 10 nanometer, and there's no need for that in photonics. So the original target of silicon photonics, the electro-optic co-integration in a single die, was given up. So even so, the silicon photonics people, they use 2 different pieces of silicon, one 10 nanometer for driver and DSP, and some much larger structure size for the photonics. Then there have been and still continuing, there's decades of work on monolithic laser integration in for example, silicon germanium. In the last years, this has been giving up or replaced or superseded by indium phosphide die-attach method, quantum dot co-integration of, sorry, not die-attach, but quantum dot co-integration indium phosphide on silicon. So they gave up on trying to do everything in silicon. So looking into my crystal ball, I see that in 2024, silicon photonic will give up phase control for indium phosphide chip integrating like 2 laser lasers to reduce the picojoule per bit. In 2025, silicon photonic will give up detectors for indium phosphide for higher responsivity or lower dark current. In 2026, 6-inch indium phosphide wafers largely driven by the consumer market will be available in high quality. And in 2027, silicon photonics people will find out that you can also replace the silicon waveguides by indium phosphide waveguides, and then we all end up at monolithic indium phosphide photonic integrated circuits. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you very much for this very enjoyable presentation. I think we're not able to see, but here with the people we've been laughing a lot and smiling a lot at your presentation. I think it's also very thought provocative. I'm sure that at the OFC RUMP session, this was a good discussion starter. Am I right?
Yeah, definitely. We had some nice discussions. So, and of course, it was a bit humorous, but I was trying to remind the silicon photonics why they originally started their job. I mean, silicon photonics was started to drive out the electronic communications from the 3 centimeter to 30 centimeter segment. So in these short, that was the last region not yet occupied by photonics. And This is the reach where the silicon photonics scaling story holds, right? Only in the 3 centimeter reach you can achieve the 100 millions of pieces per year which you need to profit from the silicon photonics scale. On the other hand, what really has happened is that silicon photonics is one additional transceiver player in the already overcrowded transceiver market for longer distance, right? And this is not really sensible. So thinking a bit more positively, so what has made the success in electronics a couple of decades before? It was mainly the standardization, that there was all industry was pulling on the same rope into the same direction, right? And I'm missing that a bit in photonics, with all due respect for PhotonDelta and MIT, right, who are driving the photonics roadmap. This process should be driven by the big ones, by the momentums, the coherence and everything. And then we would have a much better chance to kick out electronics from the 3 centimeter segment, which should be our target for the next 10 years.
Yes, no, I totally see your point, Martin. Very valid. I think that's indeed what we're trying to achieve with the road mapping. But indeed, we need more of the bigger players to join on the wagon, and then only we can really achieve the standardization that's required. You know, to maybe not push out electronics as a whole, but at least to for those functionalities that are required by photonics, that we can deliver those. The market needs to be. It has to be easy for the market to adopt the technology. It needs to be standardized plug-and-play solutions where they can design their chips with, and we are still far from that. And in order to scale and to industrialize this technology, that's really what's necessary. But thank you again very much for your presentation, Martin. That was we'll stay in touch. Thank you. All right, we have come to the end of this Delta Dialogues episode. Now, when you've been looking at these presentations of the people attending the OFC and you think, wow, I would like to join the OFC next year, that's possible. We as PhotonDelta are investigating the organization of a PhotonDelta pavilion at the OFC convention. This year, we have, as I mentioned, we have been 9 partners participating by themselves. Next year, it would be great to have a consolidated pavilion where all of us get more visibility. So if you're interested in joining this effort, please get in touch with us and we'll let you know as soon as we find out more. Then, do you want to contribute to our next Delta Dialogues episode? You can. Simply scan this QR code or go to the PhotonDelta website to the event section, look into the Delta Dialogues one, and you can fill out a form where you can submit your proposal. This can be for an interview, a presentation, or maybe just a topic you think would be relevant to share with the integrated photonics community. Also, if you have any feedback, please scan the QR code or go to the website and fill it out, because we really value and appreciate your input into making this a more interesting monthly call for the community. Last but not least, I would like to tell you that our next Delta Dialogues is scheduled for the 3rd of May, as usual, every first Wednesday of the month. I hope to see you then, and for now, have a good day and see you next time.